Well, hello there once more, and welcome back to another Reese Rambles episode number 40. I think we're on now. Wow, episode 40. These are really creeping up on us quite quickly, aren't they? And winter is also creeping up on us quite quickly. But more on that in a moment. But if you are a video viewer of the Rambles, you'll no doubt have noticed that the stuff in the background has changed, and that's because I'm in my studio at the moment. I had all the camera and everything over here and my lights, and I only own one set of this stuff. And I thought, rather than take it all home and just to record a ramble and then bring it all back to sort of finish off the video that I'm working on, which I'm sure you'll no doubt see in the background, I thought, why not just get it set up here and have a crack at recording a ramble here? So I don't know if this is going to be a regular thing. I do quite like recording them in my spare room at home, and I do think it looks quite nice the way I've got it all set up. But hey, you never know. I might do the odd one from here. And for the benefit of the people who are audio listeners, I've got some Atari stuff in the background, which should probably come as no surprise. Atari 2600 and 7800 stuff. And this is still a predominantly audio offering, but I thought I would mark the occasion. And just while we're on the topic of video, just very briefly, I did have quite a funny comment last week. I did mention this in the video, but I had a comment from David Mostly 8410 who says, your video software is making you look like a kidnap victim reading a ransom note as you sweat it out, lol. And David, I think that's a very fair assessment. I have played with my camera settings again, which obviously I've got to get the color balance and stuff right for this setup here. And hopefully I'm looking a lot less red this week. It certainly looks better on my screen and on the preview. And serves me right for trying to mess around with settings and things. But there we go. I guess we should get on with the actual ramble, I guess. So, as I am sat here recording this, it is Black Friday today. Of course, famously the big shopping day immediately after Thanksgiving in the US. And yes, we do Black Friday and Cyber Monday here in the UK, even though we don't do Thanksgiving. Actually, just as a bit of an aside, I was thinking about Thanksgiving just earlier, and I was thinking, isn't it strange how in America they have like Christmas and then like a month, but like a month before it, they have another Christmas. So they've got like two Christmases because they do all the same stuff. You have people have the family round and have the big dinner and everything else. And it's like, isn't that a bit crazy? But then actually, the more I thought about it, the more I thought, no, they've got the right idea there. You have your big turkey dinner and all that stuff. And then a month later, you do it all again. And that's quite cool. But the bit that I don't necessarily like is Black Friday because the whole thing's just become this big cynical scam, really. So, I mean, I used to work in retail sort of 20 years ago, selling electrical things, appliances, and that kind of thing for a big national chain. And we didn't do Black Friday at the time, really. Our big sale days were kind of Easter and Boxing Day, obviously the day after Christmas. And there are various laws around the way that prices have to be advertised and stuff. In fact, I was actually, I went and got my hair cut, I think it was last week, and I was actually talking to my hairdresser, and she was saying that she'd had her eye on this playset for her daughter, and she's keeping an eye on the price because she wants to get it sort of as cheap as possible, as you do. And she said that, it had been advertised at a particular price, and then all of a sudden, a couple of weeks ago, she checked, and it had gone up by about £15 or whatever. Which is quite a lot, and it's gone up from like £60 to £75, I think. And she asked the person at the retailer, and this was a big national toy retailer who shall remain nameless, asked the actual lady in the shop, and she said, oh yeah, it's going to be on offer for Black Friday. And basically what they'd done is they'd put the price up from £60 to £75, and then on Black Friday they were going to reduce it back to £60 so they could legitimately claim that it was on sale, because like I say, there are laws here in the UK that stuff has to be advertised at a higher price for a certain number of days before you can legitimately claim that it's on sale. It's like a consumer protection thing. And of course, all the retailers immediately worked out that, all you have to do is put the price up a certain number of days before your sale starts, and then you can claim that it's on sale, put the price back down. And of course, not all customers are as savvy as my hairdresser, and they'll go in on the day and say, oh, it's £15 off that, I'll buy that now. And actually, that's just the normal price. 20 years ago, when I was working in electrical retail for a big national electronics and home appliance retailer. We used to do exactly the same thing for Boxing Day and the Easter sales and stuff like that. And we were actually kind of worse for it because we had like hundreds of stores across the country, and we'd have the stuff for sale at the lower price in only a small number of those stores, and not really advertise it, and just have it on a shelf somewhere and not kind of shout about it for whatever the requisite number of days was. Then put the price up, and then obviously bring it back down for the sale. And we'd have stock, we'd have like a particular area of the warehouse where we'd store the stuff, and that would be kind of walled off, and well, not physically walled off, but you know what I mean. It wouldn't actually be officially on the system for us to be able to sell, and the whole thing was just really dodgy. So yeah, buyer beware and all of that stuff. As always, the cynical face of capitalism. Like I say, if they were doing it 20 years ago before Black Friday was even a thing, I imagine it's even worse now. But hey, I don't want to get myself into any kind of libel lawsuit or anything like that, so I won't name the name of that particular chain. But anyway, of course, it's also the end of November. Next week it will be December, which it's amazing how quickly that's come round. I know, as we all get old, as we are, the years get shorter and shorter, don't they? The inevitable march towards the inevitable. But that also means that I'm starting to get some headlines pop up on my phone about the Weatherbomb. That's right. So I just wanted to acknowledge this as well. By the way, I'm not a regular Daily Mirror reader. It was just one of the first results that came up that mentioned this that wasn't GB News. So yes, the tabloid newspapers are really having a field day this past few days. The weather is getting colder because it is the end of November, coming into December, and they're all talking about this snow bomb that's going to hit the UK. And just like every year, we have this incredible weather phenomenon in the UK. Like I say, it happens every year. It's an annual thing, and it's called winter. And basically what happens is it gets cold for a few months, and sometimes it's even cold enough to snow. And for some reason every year the tabloid newspapers absolutely lose their shit over it and claim that it's some kind of apocalyptic weather phenomenon that's going to decimate the population of the UK, when actually it's just a bit cold. All right, yeah, we are living in particular political times where a lot of people can't afford to heat their houses, so I guess it is I guess it's quite scary for a lot of people, unfortunately. But ultimately it's winter. It happens every year, and every year they do this, and I guess they keep doing it because people keep clicking on it because they go, oh, the weather bomb's coming. Have you heard about the weather bomb, or the snow bomb, or whatever the hell they want to they want to brand it as this year. I actually saw I was on Threads of all places the other day, and the Met Office, who do all the weather forecasting here in the UK, they actually have they have an official Threads account, and they posted a video on there where they were actually reacting to this, and it was quite sarcastic. Unfortunately, I've only seen it on Threads, so I can't really link to it. But it was basically someone just kind of saying essentially what I've just said. It's called winter. It happens every year. Inevitably, the weather gets cold. But so there we go. Watch out. It's going to be winter soon. I think we all knew that. So in actual retro gaming news, again, I know 2 weeks in a row, some actual news to do with this thing that we do. The Intellivision Amico is in the news again, this long-running saga that is the Intellivision Amico. And if you're not familiar with the console, basically the Intellivision was a games console years and years ago, like way back in the 1970s, one of the OG games consoles. And basically a company brought it back. I'm just thinking about the guy. There's so much history here. Slopes did a great video about it, which I'll link to down below if you want to get caught up on the kind of the history of it. But essentially, this whole thing has kind of smelt a bit like a scam since the beginning. Although they have shipped some physical games, but the console is still nowhere to be seen. So yeah, all a bit mysterious. But basically, a company is trying to bring back the Intellivision brand with their own console called the Amico. And the latest development in all this is that they've run out of money. Again, this isn't the first time. And basically this was a crowdfunded thing. So they had their own crowdfunding campaign. People signed up, they pledged their money. The money was supposed to go towards manufacturing the consoles and the games and all of that stuff. And time after time, the consoles haven't actually appeared. And the company has run out of money multiple times. And they've done more fundraising off the back of that. And they've started selling physical games, even though people don't have the consoles yet. And again, they've just run out of money again. And so they've started another fundraising campaign. Although this one's, you do actually get something for this one, something useful. So basically what they've announced is that they have a smartphone app. And you can download this app and you can install Intellivision Amico games and you can play them basically emulated on your phone. And that the money that they're raising from this is going to go towards the manufacturing of the physical consoles. Yes, another development in the Amico, the Amico saga. It basically says here, this is on Time Extension. If you're one of our valued Amico console pre-order customers, you can confirm your deposit on the site to enable access to Amico Home download codes for the console packing games as they become available on Amico Home for Android. Amico Home obviously being the app. Blah-de-blah, if you're a limited collector's boxed edition owner, you can register box edition, get access download code for those games as they become available on Amico Home for Android. So basically what they're saying is that if you're one of the people that's already backed it and pre-ordered these games, then you'll get a code and you don't have to pay for the games again. But for everyone else, you're basically helping to fundraise for those people. So the whole thing's just a bit of a shambles. I don't know if I've kind of got the wrong end of the stick here, but it's probably safe to assume with this stuff that it is a shambles. I just wanted to acknowledge that they were up to their old tricks in the news again. If you're interested in that, if you want to check out the app for some bizarre reason, I'll link to that in the usual places. So in slightly happier retro gaming news, or certainly for me, because it's something that's very dear to my heart, it is the 30th anniversary of the launch of the Atari Jaguar, or Jaguar, if you prefer. And the Jag was released 30 years ago this week. In fact, it was yesterday, as at the time of recording, in North America. Obviously, Atari being an American company, I guess it makes sense to celebrate that as the anniversary. Of course, that original launch was quite limited, and it did take a little bit longer to kind of roll out to the rest of the world. But 30 years of the Atari Jaguar. And I remember really wanting one of these when I was a kid, because obviously I had the Atari ST, which was obviously the home computer that was launched in the 80s. And we got ours. We got the STE around, I think it was around 1991-ish. And we got the magazines, ST format magazines. And I remember reading, they were starting to do previews of the Jaguar and stuff like that, maybe a year or so in. And, of course, they were really hyping this because they had a vested interest in trying to keep Atari alive because they were publishing magazines about it. And, they were really hyping up the Jaguar and sort of any sort of press that was coming from Atari, any screenshots and, previews and news and stuff, they quite happily regurgitated. And, they were, really hyping this thing up. And I think it's worth remembering, the thing about the Jag is that people kind of look at it in hindsight and they compare it to the N64 and they compare it to the PlayStation. And they say, well, what's going on? The controller's not got analog sticks on it, and the architecture's a bit complicated to program for. So programmers didn't really, the game developers didn't really get the most out of it, and the developer support was quite poor from Atari, and people didn't really get on board with it, and all these things kind of contributed to it kind of failing. But the fact of the matter is, the N64 and the PlayStation didn't come out until over a year after the Jag was launched. And at the time of launch, the Jag was actually the most powerful home games console in existence. And it's just a shame that it wasn't kind of better supported, and that that the architecture of it did end up being a bit weird and a bit difficult to work with. But that's kind of how things were back then. It was really kind of the PlayStation and stuff where stuff sort of started to be a bit more modernized. And anyway, this isn't really my area of expertise. We're celebrating 30 years of the Jaguar. And again, time extension, because this is where I get all of my news nowadays, because they're good people. And full disclosure, I did write a book with them. Just an announcement that the Jaguar has been around for 30 years. Of course, didn't last very long. 3 years later, in '96, Atari was kind of taken over by JTS, the hard drive manufacturer, quite famously, and they just the whole thing just fell apart. But one thing that they have published quite a nice thing, just to celebrate the 30th anniversary over on Time Extension. Of course, I'll link to all of this in the usual places. Is basically the best Jaguar games of all time, they call it. Best Jaguar games of all time, but basically just the best Jaguar games. And there's this kind of ongoing joke, and I've taken part in it myself, that the Jag only has like 2 or 3 good games, and for a console that costs hundreds of pounds, because basically they only made like 150,000 of them or something. So it's actually quite a rare console, and the CD add-on for it is even rarer. So the value of these things is really kind of going through the roof, and the games as well. Although there is the Retro HQ flash cart, which I can highly recommend. But there's this kind of ongoing trope of there only being 2 or 3 good games on the Jag, and they've actually managed to dig up a few more. So just going through the list, they've got Alien vs Predator, of course. That's always cited as being one of the best games, and it is, and it's also a platform exclusive. So yeah, great game. Well worth checking out if you have the Jag, and of course there are emulators and things nowadays. Battle Morph, that's a Jaguar CD game, but you can play it with the Retro HQ flash cart if you want to, because that does support the CD games. Again, another great game. Not really much else to say. They've got Battlesphere. They've got Cybermorph, of course. I'm not quite sure why. Cybermorph, it's one of those games that people kind of mock a bit. It was one of the launch titles for the Jag, but I like it. I think it's a genuinely good game. Don't get me wrong; it would be better if they had analog controls, but it didn't. So that was just how it was back then. But give it a go if you haven't. It is a genuinely fun game. And obviously they've got Doom, one of the best ports of Doom. It doesn't have the music, but other than that, it's pretty much perfect. Perfect port of the PC version. You've got Gorf Classic. I've not played that. Release date 2006. That probably explains it. So that's one of the later. Of course, there is quite an active homebrew scene on the Jag nowadays, and some kind of later releases. Lots of things that were cancelled back in the day that people have kind of rescued and picked up and since released. Highlander, that's a Jaguar CD game. I do have that. Good game. Iron Soldier, of course, a classic. Protector. I've not played Protector. 99. Okay, so it's slightly later on. Rayman, of course. But anyway, the list is there. And I might... obviously, when they did their list of 2,600 and 7,800 games a while back, I actually went through and did a video on my second channel, where I went through and kind of tried them all out and just kind of gave my impressions and stuff. And I might well do that with this list as well. I do own pretty much the complete set of cartridge games for the Jag, and like I say, the flash cart as well. So perhaps an idea to steal an idea for some content there potentially. But there we go. Yep, 30 years of the Jag, one of my favourite consoles, and long live the Atari Jaguar. So last week I talked about the RetroTink 4K and the OSSC Pro, which are scalers, which take an input from an old games console or computer or whatever, and upscale it and kind of process it in various different ways to make it work with modern 4K displays. And the inventor of the RetroTink 4K is a chap called Mike Chi, and he's a really well known and well liked figure in the community. Great guy. He's done a lot for the retro gaming community over the years, starting with the original RetroTink, and then obviously he did the 5X and now the 4K, and various little bits of sort of FPGA based video scaling hardware for retro gaming in between those, and very active on Twitter or X or whatever the hell it's called this week. And so I was very interested to read that Mike Chi, as announced on X just a couple of days ago, has now joined the Mars FPGA team. Now, if you're not familiar with the Mars FPGA, do you know what the Mister is? Maybe I'll explain what the Mister is. So the Mister is a big open source project built around a board called the DE10 Nano, and it was an educational board that was released by Intel to teach people FPGA development, and FPGA being a kind of chip that's like programmable to I'm going to use the word emulate, other chips. And basically what this community did, they kind of spotted this board and said, hey, we can make this, we can use this to run old console and computer games and stuff up to a point, up to a certain sort of level of complexity. And people started making these cores for this thing, making hardware add-ons with like extra RAM and different video outputs and stuff like that. And the Mister project kind of came about, and it's absolutely fantastic. A lot of the hardware on there has been recreated, basically one-to-one as far as the original chips are concerned on the FPGA. I should point out that that's not necessarily the case. Some of them are, a little bit fudged a bit or whatever. So when people say, "Oh, it's not emulation because it's a direct one-to-one recreation," oh God, gone all American for Thanksgiving, recreation of the original hardware. That's not really strictly true in all cases. And anyway, that's a whole ongoing debate. Essentially, all you need to know is that there's this little thing. You can load stuff up on it, and you can run all your old console and computer games, and they run basically exactly as per the original, sort of frame for frame, cycle accurate in most cases. Unlike the kind of software emulation that you get with like a Raspberry Pi or something like that. Again, so many caveats on top of this, and I don't have time to go into all the details. So, tear me apart in the comments if you want, but whatever. So that's the Mister. And a while back, and this is something that I've not really talked about, and there's various reasons for that, because I'm still kind of getting my head around what it is and who the people are who are behind it, and how serious this thing is, and whether it's actually anything's actually going to come about, come to fruition from it. But the Mars FPGA project is basically that again, but a few years later and based around more powerful hardware. So the Mister can kind of do up to the N64 is kind of the newest core for it, and about the most complex that it can do, because you're limited to the sort of complexity of the hardware that the FPGA can handle. And so there's a Sega Saturn core, there's a PlayStation core, there's N64, and then people are saying, oh, maybe we could do like PlayStation 2 or Dreamcast or something like that. But the FPGA that's actually used in it isn't complex enough to be able to handle those things. And also some kind of later arcade games. There are absolutely loads of really awesome classic arcade games on there. Again, you can perfectly sort of accurately recreated based on the originals. Running the original code and stuff. But you get to a point with arcade machines as well. Well, obviously they've got to a certain level of complexity, and you need slightly more powerful hardware to be able to run this stuff. And that's what the Mars FPGA project is. It's kind of a bigger, newer, enhanced Mister. And Mike Chi, the guy behind the RetroTink, and I certainly didn't see this coming, but it makes sense because he's done so much great work with FPGAs and with kind of graphics to do with retro games and stuff like that, has officially joined the Mars FPGA team. And I think it's kind of lent it quite a lot of credibility in my eyes. I mean, like I say, it's not something that I was really keeping up with anyway. I was certainly aware of it. I was also aware of some noise that people in that community were making, regarding the Mister, and there's this rivalry, and it's sad really, because they're all in the same boat, and it's only a very limited market. But hey, maybe he'll sort them out and put them all in their place and lend an air of professionality to it. But I'm certainly a lot more interested in it now. I'm not a Mister fanboy. I do have one. I have the Mister Multi System. Really, really happy with it. I use it for a lot of the captured footage and stuff on my channel, just because it's a lot easier than capturing from original hardware, and it's it's closer to the original hardware than sort of emulating that stuff. So it's quite a nice. It's quite a nice compromise, from all directions as far as I'm concerned. But Mars FPGA. So I guess I'm going to have to start keeping up with this project now and seeing how it's developing. I think it's still quite a way off being publicly available, and of course, development on Mister is still very, very active. And if you've been thinking about picking up a Mister, I can definitely recommend it. Fantastic bit of hardware. But interesting news here. Bit out of left field, but it's interesting. I don't keep using that word. I'll shut up now. So that's pretty much all I have for you this week. As far as updates on this studio are concerned, a video went out on my main channel, a sponsored video talking about standing desks with a company that shall not be named because I'm not going to do any more for them than I was contractually obliged to say. But needless to say, I'm very happy with my standing desk. It's been really handy for filming and stuff. Just being able to vary the height and stuff. So that's cool. And that's a very rare sponsored video for me. But I think it came out quite well. Had some good feedback off that. And I think people understand where I was coming from with that. So that's all good. And there's also been a supporter exclusive update. I was over here one night and had to fix some stuff. I've also put some curtains up over the doors, which are really great for acoustics and also for giving me a bit more control over the lighting in here, which is fantastic. So I thought I would do a supporter update on that. That's out on my Patreon and Coffee and all that other stuff, YouTube channel members. And basically this back wall, the wooden cladding was actually starting to fall apart because I hadn't quite put it together properly. Had some challenges with that, obviously with it being slightly warped because it had been in storage for a long time. And essentially, in that video, I take the entire wall apart and rebuild it, which was a pain. But I'm very pleased to say that was about a week ago now, and it's looking fantastic. It's not shifted again, and it's not falling apart again. More importantly, so I think I've actually finally solved that problem. I had a message from the landlord yesterday asking what the big pile of rubbish was that I dumped in the next office, which technically isn't mine. Obviously, it's kind of part of this, but I'm not renting it as part of the agreement. And I have been kind of doing some bits of work in there for this, which you've probably seen in the videos, cutting the cladding and various other bits and bobs. And yes, I had left a big pile of boxes in there that I was going to get round to chucking into the bin, but he just said, by the way, if you could sort those out. So that's what I've been doing this morning, just keeping him happy. And he's actually been in for a visit today. He was bumbling around the site as he often does. So I obviously invited him in. He's really supportive of what I'm doing here, and he really loves it. He's worked in the industry himself for his whole life, so really cool to have him on board with everything as well. But that's studio updates. I'm going back to proper videos on the main channel now for a while. I can't see any big things happening here. Obviously, the little bits like the curtains and things I have been recording, and I'm sure there'll be a bit of a wrap up at some point. But keen to get on with recording proper videos and things. And that starts with the Atari stuff that I have behind me. So I guess I'd better get on with that because I need to get that recorded today, and it's now afternoon time. So that's it until next week. I guess I will see you in Ramble number 41. Bye.